Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the Tarzaned and Dantes drama, and it's really escalated the last day or so. But I've just been listening to a lot of this stuff in the background while I've been playing League over the past couple of days, and I figured, I'll make a quick video summarizing what's going on between the two, the main points, and then give my quick thoughts on it. But it's obviously gone too far at this point, and I think that people should stop talking about it. Even though I know I'm making this video, this will be like the only one I do about it, just get my thoughts out there about it. Basically, Tarzan and Dantes, both jungle mains, both high elo, everyone should know, especially by now, went to Brazil. They had their Brazil trip that Dantes had put together. They put together a team. They were going to play in a tournament, do some solo queue climbing in Brazil, and then the tournament fell apart, and Dantes tried to organize his own tournament, but it didn't end up going so well because there were like tiebreaker rules, and they ended up getting into like a four-way tiebreaker, and they hadn't quite set up the tiebreaker rules, so they kind of like scuffed their team into the next round of the tournament without resolving the tiebreaker. They just like added their team as an extra team to the next round of the tournament. And, so they were like receiving backlash from the Brazilian community, and like the team environment in scrims and throughout the whole thing was just a complete disaster. They were obviously playing it up a lot on stream, but it was pretty bad off stream too. Tarzan essentially said that the whole thing was a mess, and that like people, especially like the more successful streamers, were not paying for groceries and their fair share of like shared expenses while they were there. People were doing drugs, although he said Dantes was one who was not. And that the whole thing was just kind of a mess. There was a team meeting where essentially Dantes was telling Tarzan that he needed to stop criticizing him while he was playing jungle, because too many people were hating on him playing jungle and saying that Tarzan should jungle instead, and that he was bad at the game and stuff like that. And Tarzan was kind of taken aback because he's a very competitive player who doesn't really care about what people think about him and cares more about like just being good at the game and letting that speak for itself. And Dantes is a player who, is younger and maybe a little bit insecure and cares what people think about him and stuff like that. As his stream's grown a lot in popularity over the last couple of years. For context, Tarzan is like 29 and Dantes is 22. And, a lot of people are going to say that that's like a crutch that Dantes has been leaning on or whatever. But I think that there is a huge, significant difference between a 22-year-old and a 29-year-old guy, and the way that they're going to handle different situations and stuff like that. And so Dantes, asked Tarzan to stop criticizing him playing jungle. Tarzan was pretty pissed because he feels like he's just like he's not doing it just to be mean to the guy or to cause him to get hate. He was doing it so that he'd actually improve at jungle and they could do better as a team. And he was kind of, as any high elo player would, or most high elo players would, was kind of taken aback by the fact that Dantes cared more about public perception than he did about getting better at the game and improving. And then there was another argument, IRL, between the team, where TF Blade and Tarzan got into an argument with each other. And I guess TF Blade had told Tarzan to shut the fuck up and get out of the room. And Dantes, who was the team captain, who had put all this together, and who was supposed to be like Tarzan's friend, like didn't step in and, calm the situation down or get everyone to be respectful or anything like that. Instead, he kind of like slightly agreed, or as Tarzan put it, he like +1'd what TF Blade was saying, and mostly because at the time he was still like concerned about this narrative that was being created about him being a worse jungler than Tarzan, and Tarzan not like dealing with that and putting that out. And Tarzan did try to deal with that. Like he told people on his stream and his mods that he would ban people if they said that that Dantes was worse than him or was like bad at jungle and stuff like that. People who were flaming his teammates were supposed to be banned on his stream. So he was trying to deal with that, is what he was saying. And basically he just lost respect for Dantes as a friend for not being a good team captain and not sticking up for him. But it's at this point I would say that, like, do you really expect, a 22-year-old to step into into a fight where two people are screaming at each other. And by the way, Tarzan threatened to kill TF Blade, which Tarzan accepted was something that he had said. Do you really expect a 22-year-old to step in between like what's nearly a physical altercation between a 29-year-old Tarzan? I don't know how old TF Blade is, but I assume he's older than Dantes too. So let's say that TF Blade, I don't know, maybe like 25 or something like that, and Tarzan's like 29. Maybe TF Blade's even a little bit older. It's just whether he's the person who put the trip together or not, or whether they're calling him the team captain or not, it's just not the expectation that like a 22-year-old would step in and stop that fight. The reality is that when you have a group of guys together like that, that Tarzan should have had more of a relationship with Dantes, like a big brother and a little brother, when we're talking about that age gap there. And instead, it seems like Tarzan thought that like Dantes and him were on, the same level because they're like kind of colleagues or like, streaming together and stuff like that, both streamers. But there's a big age gap there, and Dantes, is kind of insecure and like not the most aggressive person who's going to step in and break that sort of thing up. So I think it was a bit of a weird expectation that Tarzan had, that Dantes would back him up and shut TF Blade down, or like be able to moderate that situation. But either way, like if Tarzan doesn't want to be friends with the guy over it, it is what it is. But like that's it, so they should just kind of move on. And then another situation happens where Dantes had been arguing with his girlfriend Laura, and they were arguing now at the airport as they were going back. They both live in the same city, so Tarzan was waiting with them for their flight. And it's like he described it as like it's the last time they're spending time together, and he was kind of sick of hearing them argue in the airport the whole time, and it's like in front of like 500 people. And so Laura was arguing with Dantes about how Dantes had this like family friend who's like this 30-year-old girl, and it's kind of weird, and she's like uncomfortable with it and stuff like that. And Tarzan like butted in and tried to like joke and lighten up the situation and like get them to stop arguing about it so that they could like enjoy their last time together before their flight. And he said, well, like, is she hot? Is she attractive? And Laura said no. And he said, well, I don't think you have anything to worry about then. And like, you might be reading into this too much. And Laura basically went off and started getting into an argument with Tarzan, when he was like joking and trying to diffuse the situation. She started getting into an argument with him and getting really heated and saying that it's like none of his business and that like they're not really that close friends with him. So like, why is he trying to butt into their relationship and their argument and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. And it made Tarzan feel even more ostracized from his relationship with Dantes, and made him feel like they were never really friends, and that Dantes had only used him for content, etc. Now, I don't know, again, that over these two moments, and maybe there was more stuff that we don't know about, or, this is a pretty abbreviated version, so maybe there's more stuff that makes sense. But I've watched hours of this stuff in the background while I've been playing, and I really haven't picked up on anything where it's like solidly, for a normal person, this is the thing that set Tarzan off, that makes a lot of sense as to why he wouldn't be friends with him and why he would like leak a bunch of information about him. But then what ends up happening is like they go back, Dantes and Laura end up actually breaking up, and it's kind of a weird situation. Like Dantes and Laura broke up in this context where like Laura doesn't know why Dantes broke up with her. He didn't really explain it. He basically just like said that he wanted to like do his own thing and be solo, and that like he prefers to be alone and all this emo stuff, and that he doesn't, that he loves her and that she didn't do anything wrong, but he just like wants to be by himself and all this stuff, and he like prefers being alone and being a loner and stuff, which is all very weird and emo. But it is what it is. It's very Dantes. So then Tarzan and Dantes start getting into it on Twitter, and again, this is where I think it's dumb, because instead of Tarzan just like walking away and not doing any content with the guy anymore, not collaborating with him, not being his friend IRL, just like understandable if you feel disrespected or feel like the trip was a disaster, that maybe you don't like do stuff with the guy in the future, or like you want to be less close with him for a while. That's totally understandable. But instead of doing that, he like went on stream, Tarzan, and on Twitter and tried to like leak every piece of negative information that he knew about Dantes, like any negative stuff he had said about other streamers or any person he could think of, like that he had trash talked the Brazilian scene in private while in public. He was like grateful to be there and all this stuff. And while it's true that those things that like Tarzan initially exposed did kind of show that Dantes was like a little bit insecure and two-faced and like cared more about what other people thought about him than getting better at the game and stuff like that, I don't think that that makes him like a terrible person. I think it's pretty understandable. Like it's a little bit cringe, but it's pretty understandable if you think about like the context of like 22-year-old who is like rapidly rising to fame in like the league streaming scene, and he's like using people for content and kind of like insecure about what people think about him. I think that that's like hits the nail on the head for what you would expect for like a 22-year-old internet personality. So I don't really think that it's anything crazy or that it's like super negative. And I don't even think this stuff is like that's surprising, because not only is it what you would expect, but if you like watch a lot of Dantes, you probably already know the guy's insecure. So it just kind of is what it is. And so because of that, and probably like the lack of an effect it's having in terms of that sort of thing, and Dantes like going on to defend himself and like saying that Tarzan is like a really weird, vindictive person for like trying to leak all this information, and like questioning whether Tarzan was like asking them about other random people while they were there together talking, because he was like intending to collect information to leak stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And the argument gets more and more escalated until eventually Tarzan brings up this point that he had been holding on to, that he had mentioned was like a nuke, that like people wouldn't look at Dantes the same way ever again, that he could like really expose him, but he didn't want to because it implicated Laura, and Laura had like apologized to him, and he had apologized to her for like the argument they had at the airport, because he like, said that he was joking and wasn't trying to like get involved, like in their argument or whatever, but he was just trying to like lighten the mood and stuff like that. And she was saying that like she was really upset, and that the argument didn't have to be that bad and stuff like that. So they kind of apologized to each other. So because he was on decent terms with Laura, he was saying he didn't want to implicate her in some huge drama information or something like that. But then as the argument progressed, he just felt like he had to leak it anyways, probably because a lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense and is really vindictive, coming from Tarzan. And so he leaks that basically Dantes had confided in him that when Dantes had gone to Germany for like an EU solo queue grind trip, that he had like slept with a couple of girls, and two of them were kind of developing like a serious feelings for him and stuff like that, and that he had like a girl back home that he had serious feelings for, and that what had ended up happening is that he came back to NA, and while he was in NA, this girl, Laura, who he had been hooking up with in EU during that trip for about a month, she ended up getting pregnant, and they ended up, we don't know all the details, but she ended up getting an abortion at about 1 month in. And Tarzan tried to paint this as like Dantes, like, got this girl pregnant, had her get an abortion while she was in EU, while he was sitting in NA playing solo queue and streaming, and that like makes him a really terrible person. But we're missing a lot of context. Like, first off, this is such a crazy thing to like leak that's like so personal, and you have to imagine that if Dantes confided this in Tarzan, Dantes definitely thought that they had a real friendship at some point if he told information to him that he felt like could damage him a lot as like a public figure and personality. If Tarzan ever leaked it, he had to feel like his relationship with Tarzan was very secure and trustworthy, that he could tell him like really important things about his life that he wouldn't tell anybody else except like maybe his parents and some people who were really close to him. So you have to imagine that actually like Dantes wasn't just using Tarzan for content. Like, yes, he was doing that, as any streamer is using any other streamer for content, but like Dantes, at one point, both Dantes and Tarzan thought that they had an actual friendship with each other, where Dantes was comfortable enough to share really crazy personal details about his life with him. So it doesn't look good because it doesn't hold up with Tarzan's narrative that they were like, that Dantes was fake friends with him the whole time while Tarzan thought that they were friends. It's more like they were actually friends. And I don't know why Tarzan, like, you go back and you think about what I've gone through and even the broader context of some other things that I, haven't had time to get into. And it's like, what did Dantes do really that was so crazy or out of the ordinary that it set Tarzan off to the point where he even decided not only to not be friends with the guy, but to leak all of this crazy information about him. And so, to be honest, like, the whole thing reflects really poorly on Tarzan as a friend and an ex-friend, that he is super vindictive, can't keep his mouth shut, and will, like, the minute he feels disrespected by anybody, he will use every piece of information he has to completely trash that person, which is just kind of like crazy behavior, right? Especially considering the age gap that Tarzan is like a 29-year-old guy and Dantes is like 22 and navigating, like, becoming popular, for the first time. I mean, he's been popular for a little while now, but like he's rising up, whereas Tarzan's been doing this for a long time. So that's all kind of weird. And then on like the abortion issue, really, it's none of our business. I'm pretty conservative. I happen to be like against abortion, but it was also a very quick abortion about probably 1 month into the pregnancy. And it was like a situation where you have a 22-year-old guy and this girl getting pregnant, and they've just been hooking up for a month and they have no real relationship with each other. They're like not getting married. They live halfway across the world from each other. So like if there's a scenario where you're going to like get an abortion, it's kind of this, like, obviously they weren't ready to have a child and to get married and like take care of a child together. So really it's their personal business at that point. And I think most reasonable people, even people who don't support abortion or even don't think abortion should be legal or don't think that abortion should be illegal at a certain point, when we're talking about a 1 month abortion with two people on opposite sides of the planet who are like irresponsible and not ready to take care of a child, I don't know if you can find much of a better example of like a case where they should probably have an abortion than this case. And it's, at the end of the day, like I said, it's a very controversial topic, but it's their business. It should have never been leaked by Tarzan. It's absolutely crazy that he did that. And again, remember, he was saying that he didn't want to leak this information because it implicated Laura, who, like, again, hadn't really had anything with Tarzan other than this like tiny, altercation or argument that they had in the airport. So the whole thing's just completely unhinged from Tarzan to leak all this information, frankly. And I would be, understandably furious if I were Dantes. Is it true that Dantes is like a little bit of a, content person who's your typical guy who's like using people for content and cares too much about what people on the internet think about them, and sometimes like throws their friends under the bus a little bit to for content or for better public perception? Yes, but what Tarzan did, like leaking all this private information about someone who he could have just walked away from their friendship from and never collaborated, never done anything with him again, instead to leak all of this information, including ultra personal information that implicated and had to do with this random girl, right, is so crazy that it kind of dwarfs like Dantes' personality flaws, basically. Because you have two unhinged, well, really one, but one an unhinged person, but you've got two people who are obviously like both trolling, and it doesn't make either of them look better. It just looks like they're both idiots, and Tarzan has a huge problem with like friendships and like ending friendships too quickly over nothing and feeling disrespected very easily over nothing. And the way he ends friendships, instead of walking away, he has to like trash them and release all this information he has about them and use it as ammunition. Everything that they've ever told him in private. And I do think that that makes it harder for him to form genuine friendships, because how is anybody, especially from the league scene, how is anybody going to trust this guy moving forward to be their friend when he does something like this to somebody? Over again, I've tried to think about, and I've listened to all the stuff that Tarzan's put out about what exactly, I don't really know. Like that the Brazil trip sucked, and that Dantes didn't step in as a 22-year-old to break up a fight between him and TF Blade. And that like he was tweeting, some stuff instead of apologizing. It's just like kind of crazy. And then, for Dantes, like his lifestyle choices, right? What he was doing in Europe with all these girls and stuff like that. It's weird. It's unhinged, and it has consequences. And he ended up putting a girl in a really bad situation, and they ended up in a situation where they had to have an abortion, which is never something that anybody wants to do. And we don't know, at what level that decision was made, whether Laura made that decision on her own, whether Dantes, it's a different story, right? The narrative of if Laura makes the decision on her own because they're not ready and stuff like that, and she was just hooking up with him for a month, then it could be completely out of his hands. If it is, the case that Dantes was like pushing her to get an abortion so that he could play League or whatever, obviously that's a really terrible thing to do. And obviously Dantes cares a little bit too much about what people think about him online, and he's a little bit of a, maybe not quite as genuine as a friend as you would want, as someone who cares too much about personality and content and what public opinion is. But at the end of the day, they're both pretty bad, and it's just terrible drama. So, that's it. I just wanted to give a summary of it and give my thoughts. I think they're both trolling. Obviously, with the latest thing, it seems like Tarzan's trolling a little bit harder. Maybe there'll be more information about it. But, I spent so long listening to them yap about that stuff that I felt like I could, kind of give a summary of it, so that you don't have to listen through all of that. And it takes so long. And frankly, hey, let's give some attention to a small up-and-coming Braum streamer rather than these drama farming Andes over here, right? This is the only drama video I've ever done. And frankly, the only reason why I'm doing it is because I'm out of content. And, I listened to them yap for 4 or 5 hours about it. So I might as well, summarize it and give my thoughts. Otherwise, all that time for me is completely wasted. And I would not recommend you go and watch any of that stuff because, again, it's a huge time sink and nothing good comes of it. So, if we could stop the drama, that would be great. I'll get back to making some great educational support videos or something like that. So, it's cancer. Best of luck to you guys out there in solo queue, and have a wonderful day if you can. GG.